Hello, this is a video about the test review for Chapter 8. The first question says, it is reported that 27% of Americans with a smartphone have an iPhone. We did a random survey of 50 Americans with a smartphone and found that 20 out of 50 have an iPhone. Is there enough evidence at the 5% level that 27% or more of Americans with a smartphone have an iPhone? So we're first going to talk about what's given. And what we have is P, which is the proportion of all Americans, is 27%. P hat, which is our sample proportion, is 20 out of 50, which is 0.4. N, which is our sample size, is 50. And our alpha is 0.05 because it's a 5% level. We're first going to talk about HO and HA. So our HO is P equals 0.27. The proportion of Americans with a smartphone who have an iPhone is 27%. HA is P is greater than 0.27. So a couple little comments here. First of all, it's greater than because in the problem it says 27% or more. And remember, HO and HA are the same number, 0.27. HO is P equals 0.27. HA is P is greater than 0.27. So HA, our alternative hypothesis, is the proportion of Americans with a smartphone who have an iPhone is greater than 27%. Next, we're going to check the conditions. The first condition is it needs to be random, and in the problem it states that it is random. Condition 2, the population has to be greater than 10 times the sample size. In this case, your population is all Americans with a smartphone, greater than 10 times our sample size of 50. 10 times 50 is 5,000. Are there more Americans with a smartphone than 5,000? The answer is yes. Okay, condition 3. 10 times 50 is 500. Sorry. Condition 3, n times p is greater than or equal to 10, and n times 1 minus p greater than or equal to 10. So 50 is n, p is 0.27. 50 times 0.27 is 13.5. 13.5 is greater than or equal to 10. And 50 times 1 minus p, p is 0.27, gives you 36.5. 36.5 is greater than or equal to 10. All the conditions pass, so we can move on. Next, to do the work by hand, we have to find the SE. So to find the SE, it's the square root of p times 1 minus p all over n. So SE is square root of 0.27 times 1 minus 0.27 over 50, and that equals 0.063. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in the calculator so you can see how to type it in. So go to the home screen, second mode. We do square root, second x squared. We're going to do 0.27, parenthesis, 1 minus 0.27, close parenthesis, divided by n, which is 50. So it follows the same formula. Make sure everything is under the square root, and you will get 0.0628 if we round 4 decimal places. Here I rounded 3, 0.063. Next, we're going to find our z by taking p hat minus p over the SE. So that's 0.40 minus 0.27 over 0.063, which gives us a test statistic of 2.07. So again, in the calculator, you'll want to do parenthesis 0.40 minus 0.27, close parenthesis, divided by 0.063, which gives us the 2.06 or 2.07. Okay, so our 2.07 is our test statistic. And if we drew a picture of this, the 2.07 would be on the right side, and we're looking for greater than. Now, you can go to the table and look up 2.07 to find the p-value of 0.0192, or we can check this in the calculator. So to check it in the calculator, this entire problem, we're going to go to, well, first of all, make sure when you go to y equals that your plot is off. There's nothing in y1 in case we want to use the draw feature. So we go to stat, to the right for tests, choose number 5 for one proportion z statistic. Our p is 0.27. Now remember, the calculator does not want the 0.40. The calculator wants the fraction, and the fraction was 20 for x. Enter. N is 50. Enter. We're going to choose greater than push enter on top of greater than. And then you can choose calculate if you just want the numbers, or draw if you want the picture. I'm going to go ahead and choose draw. And it gives you your test statistic 2.07 and your p-value 0.0192. Okay. Now, once we have our p-value, to make our decision, we're going to compare our p-value to our alpha. So our p-value is 0.0192. Our alpha is 0.05. Since our p-value is smaller than alpha, we reject HO. There is statistically significant evidence to reject HO because our p-value is 0.0192. We conclude HA, which is the proportion of Americans with a smartphone who have an iPhone, is greater than 27%. So the conclusion goes back to HA, but in this case it is greater than 27%. Now, to find the confidence interval, the formula is p hat plus or minus z star times your SE. P hat is 0.40. The z star for 95%, because alpha is 5%, we're going to be 95% confident, and that's what the question asked for. Z star is 1.96, and the SE we found earlier is 0.063. So to find that in the calculator, we'll first type it in, and then we'll check it in the calculator. So we go to second mode in the calculator. We do 0.40. We'll do minus 1.96, parenthesis, and your SE is 0.063. Enter. So we get 0.2765. And I'm going to do the same thing for plus. I'm going to hit second, enter. And then I'll change the minus to a plus. Enter, and we get 0.5234. Now, we can also check this in the calculator by going to stat, to the right for tests, choose 1 proportion z interval, which is all the way down to letter A. Choose A, enter. We put our fraction in, x is 20, n is 50. Our confidence level is 95, so in the confidence level we put 0.95. And then we go to calculate, and we get 0.642 and 0.5357. Notice the two answers are close. They're not exactly the same, but they are close to each other. So in the conclusion, I'm going to write the one I did by hand. And we are 95% confident the proportion of Americans with a smartphone who have an iPhone is between 27.7% and 52.3%. Again, if you put the answer from the calculator, it's only 1% difference. Again, in the calculator is more of an exact answer. By hand is rounding a bit, but both answers are acceptable. In the solutions, you have the step-by-step how I did everything in the calculator, so definitely check that out and practice. This was question 1.